already know I'm gonna make some people mad with this video, so if you see the title and you're already upset and angry and you don't want to listen, maybe don't watch this video. Just a forewarning. You know, you don't have to. But, you know, it's up to you. Let's get into it. What's up, YouTube? How you feeling? How you living? What's good? It's your girl Francine. Today is Wednesday. And today we're talking about a topic that I think may make some people upset or make some people confused, or you know, whatever your feelings about this topic may be. It's going to be a fairly short one because I don't think that there's much that I need to say. But, you know, I said that about yesterday's video, and then that video was 17 minutes long. So I can ramble on. That's all that proves to me. But today we're talking about reverse racism. The idea that white people can experience racism, essentially, is what that is. And, you know, I don't mean any harm with making this video. I'm not trying to be, you know, divisive or, you know, cause an argument. But I do think that this is a very important topic to talk about, especially now with a lot of people being upset about the Black Lives Matter movement and about, you know, things that are pretty much targeted to help and benefit Black people. And people are like, well, what about white people? Or, you know, Black people don't experience as much racism as before, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I think that we need to talk about that because at the end of the day, this is a topic that I think we should all be on board on, and I think we should all have the same views on so that things can change and move forward, because the problem is that this has never been an issue that everybody had the same ideas on and the same moves for, and that is why we're still where we are today. So you know, what I'm going to do is talk about kind of the definition of certain words and how those words mean different things and why that may be an issue for a person, if you believe that you are experiencing racism and you are also white. So let's get into it. So let me define two words for you: racism and prejudice, because they're both very important words that I think that people get confused. So racism. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines racism as a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. I.e., the idea that certain races act certain ways. It determines how they are and how they're going to be, and because of those traits and those inherent capacities, one race is superior to another race. Okay? That's racism. Now, prejudice, on the other hand, is a preconceived judgment or opinion, or, in another way, an adverse opinion or leaning formed without just grounds or before sufficient knowledge. So prejudice is essentially having an opinion or a leaning or a judgment that you have about a person without knowing that person, without getting to know anything about that person. You already have these preconceived notions. Now, you look at the two words and their definitions, you can see the inherent difference between the two. Prejudice is essentially, I have this feeling about you before you even come to me. Because of a certain thing about you, I feel this way. One of those things being race. If you see a person of a specific race and you automatically assume one thing, that is prejudice. If you have a determinant about that person because of their race, and on top of that, you feel superior to that person because of your race, that's racism. Now, let's go even deeper, right? Racism is a system. And it's a system in which a racial majority, in and of itself, is able to enforce its power and privilege over other races through political, economic, and societal institutions. So, essentially, you have prejudice, so this preconceived notion, this preconceived judgment, this preconceived opinion, plus the power to impose certain things on that person through political, economic, and societal institutions, right? So this creates inequality, and that is pretty much all that racism is brought down to: the superiority and the ability to use that superiority or power to enforce different things that causes inequality in another race. Okay, so things that may be used in the societal institutions that can cause inequality in other races is lack of health care, affordable housing, stable employment, and of course a prejudiced criminal justice system. All this can equal institutionalized racism, which can cause one race to seem superior to another race because that race underneath does not have the ability to have all of these things that this race up here have more privilege and more power to obtain. So, with that being said, let's look at history. Let's look at ways that this may have been imposed throughout time and how they still are in place. Well, we look at things like slavery, of course. When black people were brought here, we were property, right? We were 3/5 of a person and we were seen as property. And not until the 13th Amendment was passed was that ever possible to not be a thing, right? Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment, and then even after that, there were still caveats in that still allowed slavery to exist even to this day, right? We have the whole idea that if you go to jail, you can technically be seen as you don't have to be paid to do hard labor. So that's still slavery to this day that is going on predominantly from white people, because if you look for black people, if you look at the fact that black people are at higher rates to be ending up in jails and the criminal justice system in general, slavery technically is still going on to this day, right? And then even after slavery was abolished, even after, the Emancipation Proclamation was put into law, and also Juneteenth, when actually everybody found out that they were free as slaves, because even after that, there were still people who were slaves. After that happened, we didn't have Jim Crow laws, which made separate but equal. And we still had separations that were in place in order to keep us from being able to get the same benefits as white counterparts. So you look at the fact that our schools were segregated. You look at the fact that our workplaces were segregated, and that certain places and certain things were off limits to people of color because of the color of their skin. And that lasted all the way up until 1960s. Which isn't that long ago. My parents were born in the 1960s. That's not that long ago, right? And then you look at the fact that, again, we have a very racially discriminatory criminal justice system. You look at how certain laws and certain sentencings can disproportionately affect people of color. You look at the fact that people of color are more likely to end up in the criminal justice system, even though, like I said yesterday, the crime rate for both races are about the same. And you look at that, and you look at the idea that, there's this disproportionate effects on people of color, then yes, those racial divides and the superiority that was taken from slavery is still in place to this day. So you look at the fact that yes, a black person can have an issue with, or have some type of prejudice against a white person, and that may not affect that white person as much as it would a black person. Or I put it in a different way. Any person can harbor any type of hateful and hurtful prejudices towards another person. Like a black person, let's say, black people think, oh, white people don't season their food, or white people don't have rhythm, or whatever. That in no way, shape, or form affects a white person's ability to do anything. Or we can look at it even in a more hurtful sense of, a black person can have a complete and utter hatred for white people, think all white people are racist, think all white people are horrible people. And in no way, shape, or form does that affect how white people are perceived in society. However, if a white person sees that they think that all black people are on welfare, they all got, all of them are criminals, or all of them, are ignorant, and they have this idea, this perpetuates a standard that has already been set in society that has held black people back for years. There's differences. And so at the end of the day, there's prejudice in and of itself is harmful and it's hurtful. I'm not taking that away. I think that prejudice is not necessary, especially, if we're trying to build a more unified society. However, prejudice doesn't cause harm. Racism does. And because there is an ability to have some type of superiority and privilege when it comes to white people, racism is harmful to people who are below them in the standard of society, i.e., through different things that I've listed before that are still in place to this day. So that's why there's a difference between racism and prejudice. Let's set it in a little bit more. Let me give you some prime examples. I gave you societal, like political examples. So let me give you some real life, real world examples of how this is perpetuated through society. So let's go to like standards of beauty and professionalism. Just recently, there was this idea that wearing dreadlocks or braids can be seen as a reason to either fire someone from a dress code, or even in schools, you can be suspended for having dreads. There was a whole article that I read yesterday about 2 students who were being suspended because they wore dreads to school, and it was against their dress code. And people are like, well, just follow the dress code. And it's like, well, why is that something that we can see as being against the dress code when it's predominantly black people who wear these hairstyles. And I feel like that is in place in order to discriminate against people of color on purpose. It's something that is in the standards of beauty and the standards of professionalism that says, hey, these are unprofessional because this is something that black people more than likely are going to have. Or the idea of like straight hair. People tell you all the time, if you're going to an interview, wear your hair straight. Try to keep it as professional as possible, because somehow my hair, I mean, you can't see it today because I didn't feel like doing my hair today, and it's didn't feel like doing it today. But you can say that like if I wore my hair out and the way I wore it either yesterday or the day before, someone can see that as unprofessional because it's not tame, it's wild looking to them or something along those lines, and they can say, you know what, she may have all the smarts, she may have all the credentials, but I don't like the way her hair looked. And that can be seen as an okay reason to fire someone or not hire someone. People say all the time, they try to find the best way to look as professional as they can when they go into interviews, or your LinkedIn picture, you want to make sure that you have your hair looking as professional as possible because you want somebody to see you and be like, oh yeah, that's somebody I want to hire. As if the way your hair is naturally is not okay. Or the standards of beauty when it comes to, the way your shapes. I mean, having curves, unfortunately, is seen as unprofessional. Having a slim body and slim fit is seen more as professional because you're not showing too much, or you're not, accentuating your curves or things of that nature. And that is seen as the more better standard of beauty when it comes to professionals. And nowadays, that's starting to become more and more popular, but I don't think it has gotten to the business world yet. And then this is one that bothers me: the fact that you think you can touch somebody's hair without their permission. So many black women have said, I've had people touch my hair without asking me, and I'm like, how does anybody think that that's okay? What about a black person and a black woman's hair makes you think, you know what, I can just touch that and it's fine, and they are not going to get upset at me because I can just touch their hair? I really want to ask that to people. Or the idea that speaking a certain way is seen as being white. You talk like a white girl. You talk white when you talk in a proper way. That to me, in and of itself, is rooted in racism. Is the idea that a certain way to talk is put in that a certain way to talk is seen as to be specific to a certain race. When yes, Ebonics is mostly used by people of color, but that doesn't mean that if you're not speaking in that way, that somehow makes you white. Or we can look at the criminal justice system. We can look at the fact that police brutality is disproportionately happening to people of color. The idea that you can be driving and get stopped by the police and be shot for no reason. I give you Philando Castile as an example of that. Or the idea that you could be sleeping in your bed, having the police come into your house and kill you and have no repercussions for it. I give you Breonna Taylor as an example for that. Or the fact that you could just be walking down the street, minding your own business, just trying to get home, and you can be killed by the cops. I'll give you Elijah McClain as an example of that. None of those people were guilty of any crime, but somehow they ended up losing their lives. But you see someone like Brock Turner, who was raping a woman in an alleyway, and he gets 6 months in jail because he has a future. Because the judge thought that he had a future, that he shouldn't be in jail for that long. He has a bright future ahead of him. He has such a life to live for. Or I give you Dylan Roof, who shot up a church of black people, and somehow they took him to Burger King to get some food afterwards. And that they didn't think anything of that. Or I give you the idea that there's plenty of people who somehow get away or somehow don't get the repercussions of their actions when they're white. But if you're black, you now have to be more orderly or put together. And even when you do that, you can still be killed. Or I give you, people always say affirmative action. I talked about on my Sunday video about how people were upset at Yale because they were saying that they were being discriminated against. White people and Asian Americans were being discriminated against because of affirmative action. Now, I've done plenty of papers in law school about affirmative action because I always find it very interesting. When you get into higher learning and you have people who are very ignorant, they say, oh, you're only here because of affirmative action. Oh, you're only here because you're black. Yeah, they needed to meet their quota of black people this year, so that's the only reason why you're here. And it's like, no, because that's not how affirmative action works. Actually, how affirmative action works is that race is seen as a factor in you being accepted, but it cannot be the deciding factor of how you're being accepted. So it can't be more than something like academics. It can't be more than something like SAT scores. It can't be more than that, because that's what they should be weighing. Now, it is a point in your factors, but it's not the deciding factor. And yet, we have people like Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin who have paid for their kids to get put into schools, and it's seen as like, well, they can do a couple weeks in jail for that. That's not that big of a deal. You know, it happens all the time. Rich people do this all the time. That's how people kind of looked at it. Like, rich people do this all the time. They just got caught. But somehow affirmative action is worse than that. Or we can look at things like Black History Month. People get upset about Black History Month. Why do we have a Black History Month? We don't have a White History Month. Mainly because white history is all we're really taught in schools. I mean, if I look at the academics and the curriculum of what I learned in school, I consistently got put in my head that 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Even though Columbus did not come to the North American states at all, we somehow learned that, even though it's inaccurate information. Or we learn about, you know, Lewis and Clark. Or we learn about, like, people who, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, all these people. We don't learn the actual truth that Alexander Graham Bell actually didn't invent the telephone. They don't tell you that part. They don't tell you, know what I mean? And we learn about all these diplomats. We learn about European history. We learn about all different histories from the white people's perspective. I didn't know much about African history until I did it myself. I didn't learn a lot about my African American history until I did it myself. Like I said, in my Juneteenth video, I never knew what Juneteenth was. I had no idea until I moved to the South, and I was like, wait, what? That's a thing? I didn't know about the Tulsa Black Wall Street until I did it myself. I lived in Philadelphia my whole life, and I didn't even know about the MOVE bombings, and I think I was alive at that time. I was like a baby, but I didn't know about it until I researched it myself. I went to school in Philadelphia and never learned about that. How? Like, how does that happen? Because that's not what they want to teach you. They want to teach you the history that is the dominant race. And that is why when we say things like, well, what about affirmative action? When you say things about, what about Black History Month? When you say things like that, or when you get upset about stereotypes or prejudices that may have an attachment to white people, you don't understand that the racism is much deeper and institutionalized than just having an opinion or an idea about a specific race. It's more than that. And though, again, I may upset some people by this video, I just wanted to put that out there. Not trying to be angry, not trying to yell, not trying to, like, you know, fight anybody in the comments. But I feel like understanding and learning is the way that we grow as a people. Because if we see things as actually what it is and not trying to be seen as a victim, we can actually grow and learn from each other and actually be able to make progresses instead of being here in the same place we were years ago. Because to be quite honest, much has not changed. Like, you know, people tell me all the time, Francine, you're a lawyer. You went to law school. You did all these things. You have more privilege than like a white person who's strung out on drugs or doing this. And it's like, yes, technically that allows me a lot more of a, you know, financial life and an ability to do certain things. But if me and that person was put in front of a specific, like if we were both pulled over, I'm 100% sure I would get a lot more aggression than that person, regardless of me being a lawyer, regardless of anything about it. That just has nothing to do with it. If, you know what I mean, if we're put in front of somebody and nobody knew anything about me and they only had to judge me based on my race, their ideas of me would be totally different than their ideas of that person. We both went to the same interview and they had no idea about the fact that that person was strung out on drugs doing anything, and they just looked at us in general. I'm 100% sure they would be more inclined to hire that person than me. And that is what institutionalized racism is. It's not the accolades you get. It's the fact that regardless of the accolades you get, you're still black. And being black comes with a lot of unfortunate, systematic, and institutionalized ideas about you. And that it's always going to be that way. And that's all I'm saying. At the end of the day, again, if you didn't get from the disclaimer at the beginning of this video, if you already didn't want to have this conversation, if you already didn't want to, you know, have a actual intellectual conversation about this, and you just came on here to be like, but white people are they get racism too. You understand? You're not. Okay, well, yeah, you can put that in the comments, and then I'm just not gonna respond to them. But that's okay. You can keep that opinion. It's a free world. You can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to make this video because it was nagging at me. And like I said, this is the Dispelling the Myths videos. So yesterday was about black on black crime. If you didn't see that, check that one out. A lot of people didn't watch it, which is upsetting, but you know, it's okay. I'm not trying to worry about the numbers anymore. I'm just doing this because I feel like it. So if you haven't seen that video, look at that, check that video out. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them in the comment section below. And if you haven't subscribed already, go around here and do it. I'll be back with you tomorrow, and I will be doing a probably longer video. That video is probably going to take some time because that one is a lot, and I'm really looking forward to that one because that's one that I'm extremely passionate about. This one I'm passionate about too, but I'm really looking forward to that video. So check it out. Come back here tomorrow. Can't promise you what time it's going to be up because I'm trying, y'all. I'm trying to get them up on time, but I'm working, and I'm also, I'm doing everything that I can to make sure everything gets up on time, but your girl is trying. All right. So with that being said, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.